Hashiv, welcome back. This is the final installment of this series and we'll be looking at how to create a neat effect on our character's shoes, so I hope you like it. To begin, we're going to be using the same colour we tinted the socks with, which if you remember was a mix of Chimera Magenta and Phthalo Blue, and that gives us this really dark violet tone. So we're going to paint that onto the shoes over a couple of thin layers, being very careful along the top edge, and we're going to paint one half of the shoe pink and one half turquoise. So we'll start off with the turquoise half by mixing some scale colour Caribbean blue into the base colour to give us more of a dull purple. Using that, I painted one half of the shoe, first carefully painting a line down the centre to ensure we get a clean separation between the two halves. Then I just filled the whole of that side. Again, carefully painting a line down the heel so that I essentially split the shoe into two parts. Next, we're going to add a bit more Caribbean blue into the mix, shifting it more towards the blue tone. And this time we'll apply the paint by pulling it up over the surface towards the top of the shoe, being careful not to lose that clean line down the centre. To add some structure to the surface and ensure it doesn't end up looking really flat and boring, what we're going to do is add two little blocks of colour along the side, leaving a small shadow between them. This helps to break up the surface and gives the impression of some kind of design. Then we're going to add a highlight along the ankle, pulling the paint up towards the top side. Again, we're going to do that over a couple of layers to ensure we get a nice clean, fresh looking highlight. Add some more of the Caribbean blue into the mix, shifting it more towards a turquoise this time, and we'll apply another layer. Targeting those same areas as before, but trying to cover a bit less of the surface. You can see we're using a fairly thin consistency for this so that we can pull the paint into position and create a subtle transition as we do. The structure on the side of the shoe should look a bit more obvious now. Switch to Caribbean blue on its own and we'll apply another layer, still using that same thin layer consistency. But this time we're going to need to be more careful about applying the paint, as we need to retain some of those previous layers, which is tricky because we're working on quite a small area now, so it's really easy to accidentally paint over everything. Again, just like before, we'll apply this over a couple of layers to ensure we get a clean, bright colour to the highlight. Once that's done, we'll add a little scale colour white sands into the Caribbean blue to lighten it. And this time we're going to focus on highlighting the elements that we've created within the shoe. For example, the top of the tongue. Then we'll add one here following the sharp line at the front. And also the top edge of these small stripes along the side. Just carefully tracing along the upper edge with the tip of the brush. And then we'll paint a short line at the top edge where it meets the laces. So these are essentially edge highlights, but there's no actual physical edge, you're just inventing them. Then we're going to do the top part here at the ankle where there is actually an edge. Alright, so add a bit more white sands into the mix and we'll go back for some final highlights, just picking out the edges of our little details. Targeting those same areas as before, but trying to cover a bit less of the surface. Yep, I think that looks pretty decent. So for the other side, we'll do it in much the same way, but we'll just switch in some different colours. Alright, so for the initial highlight, I'll mix some of the magenta into the base colour to increase the saturation, and we'll paint that onto the other side of the shoe, being careful to leave a thin dark line down the middle of both the front and back of the shoe. Once you've done that, add a bit of white sands into the mix to lighten it, making it more of an obvious pink tone. And we'll paint that on much like we did on the other half, creating those little structures along the side. Again, pulling the paint into position with that fairly thin layer consistency so that we create a natural transition into the highlight, applying a couple of layers to ensure the paint is clean and bright. So this is pretty straightforward to do. There's nothing really that fancy going on, it's just simple layering. The main difficulty here comes from the size of the shoe. As it's so small, you really need to be careful with what you're doing. Try to use a brush with a sharp tip and go as slow as you need to in order to keep things neat. At this stage, we're starting to pick out those fake edges, like we did on the other side, using the tip of the brush to keep things nice and clean. And we'll pick out that line along the heel as well. Add a little white sands into the mix to lighten it, and we'll use that to apply another layer. Pulling the paint up over the surface towards that top side of the shoe, being really careful to keep that sharp line down the middle that's separating the two colours. Once you're happy with that highlight, add a bit more white sands into the mix and we'll go back for another layer. Adding a small highlight along those edges, using the tip of the brush to keep things nice and clean. Yep, that's looking really good. I think they came out surprisingly well actually. Now, I did the soles black, so I spruced up the edges with a bit of black paint initially. Then I made a grey tone by mixing some of the Caribbean blue into the black. And this was applied onto the upper part of the sole to give it a little highlight. Now, I didn't bother painting the inside edge as that's going to be a lot less noticeable, so we don't really need to pick it out. But we will do the front part as there's going to be a lot more focus there. Add a bit of white sands into that grey tone to get more of a medium grey, and we'll go back for some more highlights. This is a lot like painting our jacket, just on a much smaller surface. And we'll try to pick out the edge here at the front, and then round the back as well. On the side, we'll add a couple small random highlights along the edge, just to break up the surface and add some interest. Mix in a bit more white sands, making quite a light grey this time, and again we'll target that front edge. Yep, that looks okay. And then the same idea on the back. Finally, we'll grab some of the white sands on its own and apply very small dots just at that back and front edge. So the last thing we need to do is just to paint in the laces, and we'll do that quite simply with some of that lighter grey tone, just pulling it over each lace to pick out the detail. And there we go, I think that looks really good. Alright, so here's how it looks once I have painted the other one. It fits really well with the rest of the paint job. I hope you found some ideas that you're going to be able to use yourself. Thanks a lot for your support, and I hope to see you in the next video, whatever that might be. Thanks again, bye for now.